Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I am Community Engagement Coordinator at Wheaton Public Library. Throughout the year, we partner with the DuPage Art League to bring you these art demonstrations. Founded 63 years ago, the DuPage Art League is committed to the arts and bringing enriching programming to art lovers throughout our community. Located on Front Street in downtown Wheaton, the DuPage Art League is both a school and gallery. They are dedicated to promoting and encouraging the visual arts through classes, workshops, gallery exhibits, and free public fine arts programs. Their classes and workshops cover a wide range of mediums and are designed for all ages. The storefront gallery and gift shop are open to the public. We are grateful to the DuPage Art League for arranging tonight's demonstration by master watercolorist David Dallison. David has traveled to over 36 countries throughout the world with the mission to celebrate different cultures through paint. He highly valued the ability to be physically present in these locations to do complete paintings. David felt safe and welcomed as a solo traveler to remote locations where people displayed much joy, often despite difficult circumstances. The pandemic has revealed how much we took the liberty to travel and engage with strangers for granted. David's work is both a painful reminder of that freedom being cut short, as well as a symbol of hope that we will soon find our way back to making meaningful connections across the globe. So thank you so much for being here tonight, David. We're really looking forward to this. And I'll go ahead and turn the microphone and camera over to you.
Hey everybody, I am David Dallison, and this is my first webinar, so bear with me. It is a trial by fire. I've been winging it all day, trying to figure out this, that, the other thing, the microphones, who knows. Anyway, welcome to my world. What I'm gonna try to accomplish tonight is I've brought a painting along that I already completed. So this is a painting that I did in an island in the southern part of Thailand a number of years ago. And this is actually a print of it because the original is sold. But I really like this painting. It embraces a lot of the things that I aspire to as an artist. It's very fresh. I lived in China for a couple of years and I fell in love with Chinese art and the spontaneity and the freshness and the gestural qualities and the fluidity of what they have done for thousands of years. So that entered into my work somehow. I found this setting one early morning in Thailand, and this was a little village of what are called sea gypsies, and they're nomads that aren't really Thai. They can live anywhere, but this happens to be where they're living now at the time when I was there. And these are a couple of their fishing boats. And I rounded a corner and I saw this sun. It hadn't actually come up yet. You know, the thing about plein air painting is that there's a lot of chance involved. You never know exactly what's going to happen. And so in this case, I banked on the fact that someone would come up in the right spot and engage the painting in a way that I like, which doesn't always happen. And in this case, it did. So I sat for the next hour or two. I can't really remember how long it took me to do. And I jumped in with both feet as this kind of painting necessitates. And I created this painting. So I'm going to try to recreate this painting for you so you can kind of understand how it was made, how I got my light source, how I put my softer washes in, how I got my details in. So that's part of what this evening is going to entail. Besides that, I want to tell you, about myself, about what's involved with being an artist in this day and age, how I make my living, what range of things I have to do in order to make that living. Of course, COVID has brought on certain challenges as well. And also you're in my studio right now, and there's some upsides to COVID. I had never really sort of felt out the depth of Zoom. Over the last few months, I've been Zooming with my family. My parents live in Toronto, as does my sister. My brother lives in New Jersey. And because of the border crossing, I can't go to Canada and see them. So Zoom has really become a really unique and extraordinary link to at least somewhat personalize the distance. So now the crazy thing is, because I've traveled to so many countries, I have friends all over the world, and I posted this on Facebook, and it's kind of wild to think that people I met in India 5 years ago could actually be sitting here right now and watching me in my house kind of do my thing. So there's an upside to COVID. Anyway, I'm going to grab the camera and take a little walk around my studio and just kind of give you a little preview of my groove here. I'm going to flip this around so it looks away from me. Let's see if I can get that to happen. Come on, camera. Spotlight everybody. You're looking at me right now. I'm trying to get this to flip backwards. There we go. All right. So I'll just sort of ramble through a few things. There's a painting I did many years ago of my childhood home in Canada. I spent a winter working out of a tent doing these intense winter landscapes that were very cold and foreboding. Here's a range of things that I did in Morocco a few years ago. Let's see, I'm trying to do a handheld thing. My camera's moving in reverse, so I got to think backwards. Not my best strength. So that's a little scene from a Moroccan street. There's a scene from a carpet vendor who was there. So for some of you that might not know what plein air painting is, plein air painting means that you take things as they come. You take your easel and you create on location a complete painting. So in a painting like this, which is a scene of Chicago, obviously this must have taken me quite some time, right? So I came back on numerous occasions and sat in the same spot. There was never a moment that looked like that. When I think about plein air painting, to me, what it really feels like, I describe them as movies because there was no moment, we're so used to taking pictures of things and freezing a moment in time. There was no moment that ever looked like this painting. These were, just people. I might have seen this lady with her child, and then another kid came along that I liked, and I might have put him into the family, even though they might not have actually been together. So it's this gathering of subject matter as well as light. The light is moving throughout the day, and there might be shadows that appear this way at 2 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock they've all shifted. So I'll kind of grab those shadows and take the ones that I like best and put them down as I see. I hope you can see me. I can't hear you, so I'm just going to presume you can see me fine. One of the ways that I've managed to survive as an artist for all these years is I've done commissioned works. And many years ago, I got out of art, started wandering around. I was living in Evanston, Illinois at the time. And I'm going to flip it back again. There we go. I was living in Evanston, Illinois at the time, and I didn't know what to do to make a living. You get out of art school and there's no clear pattern as to what you're supposed to do. So galleries don't really want you because you're too new. You haven't really shown a lot and you haven't proven yourself. So I started knocking on doors in Evanston trying to sell my art. And one woman said to me, "Would you do a painting of my home?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do anything, just as long as I get to paint." I didn't want to wait tables. So I took my easel to her house and I did a watercolor of the house, and she paid me for it. And while I was doing it, other people saw me doing the same thing. So that became what I would call my bread and butter as an artist. And then it stemmed into me doing interiors of people's homes. So this is a house in Lake Forest where I spent about 5 months doing a whole series of watercolors of the rooms. I hope I'm not moving too fast for you guys. I know this is digital. It might not be grabbing everything the way I see it. And there's an exterior of a home that I did in Lake Forest, but I've painted all up and down the North Shore for years, doing house portraits as a way to sort of fund myself. And during COVID, I do a lot of art fairs. I travel around the country. I get invited in some really great shows, and that's a fabulous part of being an artist. I get to travel and go to cool towns and spend 2 or 3 days doing an art fair. But because of COVID and crowds, pretty much all of my shows were canceled this year. So that really threw me for a bit of a curve. So luckily I had a lot of commissions lined up, some of them fine art, some of them house portraits, whatever. And that kind of carried me through. So anyway, here is my studio. You might have said, David should have cleaned this for us. Well, actually I did. So there's another painting from that winter landscape series. I want to show you a bit of my work just so you can have a sense of when I'm doing my demo, you can kind of understand the choices I'm making and why I'm doing them. I can work very, very detailed, as you saw in my house portraits, but at the same time, that's not always the best thing for a painting, you know? So here's a very large painting I did. I love painting people in the parks. To me, it's the working class's backyard, and the parks in Chicago reflect that. So I'll go down there. Now, this one I did in my studio because it's so big and it's an oil painting. Um, but I love the gathering of people. And so Barry beautifully introduced me and mentioned how I've traveled all over the world, and I see the sort of the beauty of the continuity of life in the world. And COVID has changed all that. But when I see this painting, I see all of these people from different places, and many times I've actually been to the place that they're from. And so I have a lot of empathy for people who arrive here, especially with languages that are not understood here. Um, and it can be kind of, it can be kind of lonely, and now they've got to fit in. But America offers that incredible ability to jump into a place and sort of be at one rather easily. So that's a real theme in my work, is relaying that, because I'm an immigrant. My parents are immigrants. Hold on, I'm going to flip my camera around again and make sure. Let's see. Let's see. Is that right? Okay. Sorry, guys. I know this is not the most fluid situation, but it is what it is. Let's see if that wants to jump around. I'm going to try to get my picture in the scene now. There we go. All right. So as I was saying, my parents immigrated from England, and lucky for them, there was no language issue, right? So I was raised in an immigrant family, but I never felt like an immigrant because my parents could speak the language fluidly. So I have a kind of a blended childhood. My father is an artist. He's actually a famous illustrator. He's an editorial illustrator. And what that means is that he gets to be given a subject and relay it as he sees appropriate. So there's, as the illustration world goes, that's about as much creativity as you get. So in the 60s, we lived in New York, and he was doing a lot of work for the major magazines, could be Car and Driver, Road and Track, Sports Illustrated. And they might send him on an assignment to, let's say, Watkins Glen, or some car auction, or some, maybe the Le Mans race in France. And he would then do drawings, and they would put those in the magazines back in the days where they actually used drawings in magazines. And so he was able to make a living that way and still have a lot of creative freedom. But there's a great story. So my father's a working class British boy, and he's 13 years old, and he lives in a suburb of London called Hounslow. And it's post-war. The chance of getting out of there, moving from that working class world, is slim to none. And he's sitting in his math class one day, and a boy knocks on the door and says to the teacher, "Sir, we've been asked to find any kids who can draw. We need 3 students who can draw." And 2 kids put up their hands and volunteered and said they could draw, but they needed a third. And one of the other boys put his hand up and he said, "Oi, Dallison, he can draw." And the teacher didn't even ask him if he wanted to. He just said, "All right, put him on the list." Anyway, he went and met at this college that had asked for this assignment, and did a drawing and got a scholarship to Twickenham College, a fine art school. Showed up on the first day, couldn't really afford the jacket the boys had. You know, he really came from a tough background, but he was incredibly talented, really probably a genius in many ways. And, to not, my wife's just talking to me, sorry. Oh, I'm not on the screen. Do you have me on the screen there, Barry? Hey, Barry, are you there?
Sure, I'll change it.
I
I thought we were going to start painting.
I was gonna. Sorry, I'm chatting so much, but I just want to chat a little bit more, and then I'll get this painting going. Anyway, so my father gets this scholarship, comes to America, has some kids, and ended up really accomplishing as much as you can in the illustration world. You got the gold medal of the Society of Illustrators. And so here I am, a kid watching this world going, this is pretty cool. You know, a lot of kids want to be an artist, but their parents say, oh, you know, become an engineer or become a scientist or become something else that's practical. And I didn't get that kind of information. I got support in the arts. So that was great. And my brother's an artist, and we all ended up making careers this way. So Barry, back to painting.
Yes, and David, someone is asking, where did you attend art school?
Okay, I went to, I'm just clicking the screen here. I went to the Ontario College of Art. Actually, I came down to the States on a soccer scholarship first. I went to Illinois State University for a couple of years and realized I was not going to be a professional soccer player. And the art program there wasn't exactly what I wanted. So I transferred back to Toronto and I went to the Ontario College of Art, got my degree there. I got honors there, which was, you know, I guess a bit of a feather in my cap. And then I came back to the States, chasing love. And that didn't work out for the long haul, but the artistic career did. I studied for a little bit under Dan Gustin at the Art Institute. I'd been out of school for probably 5 or 6 years, and there was a lot of talk of master's programs, et cetera. And also, he had been to Yale, which was really kind of a benchmark school. And I kind of wanted to sort of see how I fit in against somebody who had been to a great American school. So anyway, yeah, that was a big influence for me as well. Anyway, before we start the actual painting, a fellow by the name of Brian Hall, who's a fabulous videographer. I met his father years ago, and he said, my son's this videographer. He works for Tyler Perry. He's Tyler Perry's right-hand man. He does all of his live handycam work, and he'd like to find subjects to make films about. I said, that sounds cool, you know. So I had a trip to Vietnam planned, and Brian and I talked on the phone once, maybe twice. And I said it was going to be there such and such dates. And he said, you know what, I'm going to come to Vietnam and I'm going to film you for a week and we'll see what it does. Maybe we could even make a TV show out of it. So that was very exciting. I'm already in Vietnam, and he and his buddy, what was his name? Brandon. They arrive, they take a 5-hour bus ride from Saigon down to where I'm at. I'm way down in the Mekong Delta in a really obscure little place. I mean, really obscure. And we've never met. And I said to them, be awake at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, because I'm going to take you to this morning market. And it's a floating market, and it's incredible. So it was a big roll of the dice. He rolled the dice, taking a chance on flying all the way to Vietnam without knowing me. And, you know, I didn't know if I could be good on camera. I didn't know any of that. So he filmed me for a week. We got along great. It was a fabulous week. And then he left. And about a month later, he sent me an email and said, David, check this out. So what we're going to play for you right now is a 6-minute video of his footage of me moving through Vietnam. And this is what's called a sizzle reel. And it's done with the intention of trying to actually woo TV shows or movies, etc. And that's been talked about. Who knows if that'll happen. But I think it really gives you a nice window into what I do. So we're going to let that roll. And I promise you, as soon as that's over, I'll start painting. You ready, Barry?
Yes. Okay. So I went ahead and canceled the spotlight on that video. And so I'm going to go ahead and screen share this one. Make sure that the quality is as high as we can get it. And we will get it started. Okay.
Hey everybody, I'm David Dallison. I'm a professional painter. I travel the world making paintings. I'm in Can Tha, Vietnam. It's the heart of the Mekong River. It's an amazing place. I was here 15 years ago. I remember it being beautiful, and I've just arrived to explore it through paint. Look at this. So many times when I'm out painting, people walk up to me and they say, so what do you do for a living? I say to them, I paint. And they go, well, what do you really do for a living? I say, I paint. I'm blessed. I have a father who made his living as an artist. I have a brother who makes his living as an artist. I make my living as an artist. It's a struggle. You have to be driven to do it, but that's what I do, and that's all I do. There's certain things that need to come together for me to want to stop and paint. I need a somewhat of a narrative quality. I need something that is just purely aesthetically beautiful. You know, it's few and far between. I might spend hours driving through the countryside looking for something that's really going to grab me. I love the mystery of the morning. You know, there's just something about the softness and all the darks. You don't quite know what's in them. The shadows all sort of link together in the bottoms of these boats, and it just creates this myriad of pattern and kind of a mosaic. And I guess it creates an energy, right? It's the energy of our life. I've always wanted, when I've been on the road, to be able to find a way to bring to people the experience I'm having on the road. I put myself in a highly public place. To me, this is actually comfort. I love being around this stuff that I don't know anything about. When I'm working like this, I'm almost invisible, but I'm a bit of a freak as well, so people will gather around me and watch me paint, and I love that. To me, my art is about a lot more things than just the painting. It's about this exchange of culture, and the culture isn't necessarily what's on the canvas. Voila! So we're out here on a boat at the Canton Market, and I'm just trying to get a feel for what's going on here and to see what would be appropriate for me to paint. For me to paint everything that's here, I don't think it really tells the story. I'm looking for specific things. I'm looking for a bit of individualism. I'm looking for pure aesthetic, color, the fruit on the boat and the vegetables and all the patterning of that. That's what I'm interested in. So I just sort of stand up and look around, and when I find a scene that has a blend of those things, that'll be my nucleus to start a painting. We've got laundry drying on the back of the boat here, catching the warm morning rays, freshly washed in this lovely green Mekong River. Does Tide get those stains out? The real Tide does. So these are basically car engines on a stick. And they've got them so leveraged that that guy can move that thing around. It's balanced, so he can lift it out of the water, move it around like it's a feather. And the eyes on these boats back here, they make the boat protected. They feel very important to these fishermen that they have those eyes on there. So this is the house I'm painting, that these people live on the water, and this is their home. This is day in, day out. This isn't a weekend retreat. This is their life. And this lady's been kind enough to let us walk into her life, just have a little look around. They almost always have a shrine. She's got her children's drawings on the wall. It's beautiful. And back here we have her kitchen. And that's it. It's a two-room house with a toilet. And you can see where she cooks. She has a room with a view. And this is life on the Mekong. And these are happy people. I don't exaggerate. So I'm just looking at the paintings that I've created so far on this trip. I've been here for 3 weeks and I've been pounding it hard. You know, a lot of people have this impression that when the artist is sitting out there in the field, he's got his easel and his umbrella, that it's sort of meditative and it's soulful and it's relaxing. It may be some of that stuff, but the reality is I have to make kick-ass paintings. They have to be able to get on a gallery in America, a gallery wall, and if people walk in there and want to shell out $1,000 to buy my art. So part of why I love to travel is I go to places that I know nothing about and I jump into the culture. I show up in a place I know nothing about, and I know within about a week I'm going to feel like I kind of belong there. And the world welcomes me. I show up with my easel, I sit down and I paint, and we have this amazing simpatico thing going on, and I've never found a country that doesn't offer me that.
today we'll just do a beautiful little painting. It has a lot of beautiful colors in it, and we'll have a good time.
Okay?
Okay?
Okay, come on.
All right, are we back, Barry?
Yes, you are.
All right. I hope you all enjoyed that. It's kind of strange sitting here having the camera on. I don't know which way to look. Anyway, so there you go. I think that gives you a little window as to kind of the excitement and the dynamics that go on when I'm out painting on the road. Lots of things happen spontaneously, and you have to be open to that. You know, you're supposed to take a train here and the train cancels. So you say, well, I'll hop on a bus to so-and-so. Have to be enormously flexible. And I hope that that video kind of captures some of that. Before I start, I'm going to show you a little bit about sort of the things that I take with me along the way here. So on a typical day, I will have, let's see if you can see that. There's my taboret, and in that, it folds shut. It fits into my backpack, which turns into a seat. I have a very simple aluminum easel that I take with me. It's rugged, it's tough. I've beat the heck out of it. It adjusts very quickly. I'm not going to use it today because I need certain lighting in here. It's nighttime. But otherwise, I use this for everything. It's fabulous. And it's so lightweight, I can throw it in my backpack and walk around all day looking for good scenes. I'll be using a variety of brushes. I've got a couple of larger brushes that I bought in Russia years ago. St. Petersburg, I was there and wandering around, and I came across this cool museum that had an art supply store, and I bought these great brushes. They're sable, and sable's expensive, but it wasn't so expensive in Russia. A brush like that can be $300, believe it or not. But you don't have to have $300 brushes to make some good paintings. This one I bought on my last trip to China, and it was like $3. So there you go. It's not sable, but it's also pretty darn good. Anyway, so that's the basics. I'll quickly tell you about the colors in my palette, and then I'm going to start mixing up paint. And like I said, my little promo, you can sit and watch paint dry. How fun will that be? If you can flip to my palette there, Barry, I'll just discuss these colors a little bit. I've got three yellows. One that's on the outside, it's very, very bright, a warmer yellow, and then a yet warmer yellow, which starts to move towards orange. I love this yellow. It's a Winsor Newton yellow, and I find I can mix it into a lot of things and get the kind of stuff I'm looking for. We move into reds. One of my very favorite colors is cadmium scarlet. It's an orange-leaning cadmium. I have an opera here. It's very, very outside pink, and sometimes when I'm in places like Vietnam, there's colors there that are very hard for me to get. So I sometimes need to have a few brighter colors in my palette. I have a purple here, purple dioxazine, which is from Winsor and Newton. I have a green phthalo. Old Holland is another brand that I like. I have a mixture of Daniel Smith, Holbein, Old Holland, as the different brands that I use. And then I have a sap green, a sort of a yellowy green here, and then a phthalo blue, a French ultramarine, a cerulean blue, and then an indigo. So those are the basic colors that I use. You know, let's start in. So let me describe to you a little bit of how what the challenge is in a painting like this, okay? I'm gonna have to do a vignette. There's a bright spot in this painting right here, which is the sun, and it's very light, right? So I want it to feel like light is just emanating from that place. I don't want any hard edges in this atmosphere that's around here. Everything is going to be a vignette out from there, moving into this sort of purpley horizon. There's a slight reflection on the water here. It's got a bit of an edge to it. So it's that light bouncing into the water there. And then it carries on. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little puffs of white that are down here. So it's kind of hit there and it's hit here. So that background is is going to be a big wash, and I'm going to divide it in half here so I can work on the bottom and work on the top while each is drying. Because the issue with watercolors, you have drying time issues, right? So you can't once it's wet up, you have to move into it and keep it wet. Once it gets past a certain stage, it has to be let to dry. So in that case, I'll divide the painting and I'll work on the bottom while this top is drying, okay? So that's all like kind of dangerous. It's always fraught with peril. You never know what's going to happen. There's a lot of chance involved. And then once everything is dried up, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to start to resolve some areas where these boats are detailed and put some of the harder edges in that give this foreground the pop that it has, okay? So that's my sort of premise as to how I'm going to handle this painting.
David, as we're looking at this composition, someone asks, are the brown lines, oh, I'm sorry, actually on the palette, are the brown lines on the palette purposeful, or are they just from other projects or paint leavings?
So somebody out there must be a painter. I mean, obviously there's a lot of painters out there, but that's a good question. On my most recent trip, I decided to get some caulk. Actually, it was caulk and some heavy duty glue, and try to create a few little mixing areas within my palette. It seemed like a good idea, but what happens is these palettes are pretty bendy. And what I realized after about a week or two on the road is that my liquid started to sneak under those lines. It didn't work as well as I thought it would, but it was just a kind of a workaround, because what happens is sometimes I want to have some clean area to maybe mix up a sky color, and I don't want other things moving into it. So, you know, there you go. So I'm going to, first of all, let me get my pencil out here. Where is my pencil? I think I've left it under there. There it is. So I'm using a 3B pencil. 3B is quite soft. I love the softness. If you use a really hard pencil, you can scar your paper and you'll actually see those scars coming through the watercolor. So I like to use a soft pencil. This is a 3B. They go as far as 6Bs, 7Bs, even 8Bs, which are very, very soft. Before you guys arrived, I did a little bit of a sketch here just to kind of get this boat figured out, because I didn't want to spend too much time getting the kind of detail stuff down. But I'll just show you how I would handle drawing in this other boat. So I'm just looking at this painting. It's just in front of me and I'm looking up at it. Oh, I guess you can see that. That's cool. So just, you know, I'm going to draw in the front of the boat. So I'm doing that boat on the left there. There's kind of some rules to water, you know. Water's a really fun, it's a fun thing to paint, but it's very challenging. There's some laws to water about how things reflect. They always reflect exactly down. So when I'm drawing, I'm very conscious of the fact that the tip of this boat right here has to be reflected, and that if that reflection's over here, it will not make sense and your water will not be believable. So it has to be exactly below. Everything has to fall below where it actually is above. So, you know, I'll make little marks. I'll draw on that bow, and then I'll kind of, you know, just indicate to myself that reflection that's coming down through here, right? And then there's some kind of, you know, there's a little bit of structure to the boat here, and then it comes back. There's some little parts that would be the shelter for the fishermen. So there's a great story for this group of people, the Iraqi. When there, if you recall, there was a horrendous tidal wave that hit Thailand a number of years ago, and many people died. And none of the Iraqi died. And what it is that they're so in tune with the water, they saw the tidal wave coming before it actually hit. They knew how to read the water and see that it was receding, and they all headed up into the hills and survived that horrendous tidal wave. And there was an anthropologist there when I was there who was studying them, and she told me that story. And so they became like a hot item for anthropologists to study. And she was a little bit upset because now this sort of quaint, beautiful people were all of a sudden the kind of in thing. So now I'm drawing in my posts that the boats tie off to. So what's really fun, you know, I'd have to be called a realist painter, but I love finding rather abstract scenes. So water offers that many times, right? So here's this wood that's come down, but now when it comes down the page, I can really have fun with it. You know, I can kind of like let it travel. I mean, strangely, reflections can almost end up down here sometimes. It's really weird how water works and reflections work. So that's where I get to really have kind of some looseness and a lot of freedom. Um, so this guy comes down like that. And then again, I'm just kind of indicating the pencil will show through in my painting. So I'll be able to see it through the washes for the most part. Sometimes it disappears when I get some really heavy duty washes in. The Thai boats always have these little fabric wraps on the front of the bow, and then they drape down, and they're usually really brilliant colors. So they're fun. And then it's reflected down in here. So I've got that indicated, right? So, you know, I'm doing a painting of a painting, but of course, this is not going to be a photorealist painting of this painting, right? I mean, it's that's not the point. I'm just using it as a sort of a departure, and we're just going to let it kind of go where it goes, right? So, again, I'm just trying to catch the reflection of this little shape down in the water, and then there's a beautiful little post here that's got a yellow flag on it, and then again, I'll just wind that down through the water here. And then I'll put that flag. And then what's fun is you have these little round buoys. And you know, this is almost like space to me. That's like it's ethereal. There's not really any place that you can look exactly at where things sit in space. The two boats, but besides that, not. So I love these little balls. They just like float in space to me. And they become design elements, you know. So what's really important in painting is not just being real and having your details right, but you have to think about design. You have to think about when somebody looks at the painting, where is their eye going to travel? Have you balanced out the painting? Have you got something of interest, you know, in one spot and then something that's secondary elsewhere? So that the space is all used. You want the viewer's eye to move around that page. So, you know, I've got some interesting detail in these boats, but I've got this beautiful radiant light up here in the sun. So I'm thinking about all those aspects. When I'm looking at a scene, I'm thinking about how I'm going to lay it out on my page, just as importantly as a scene being interesting. You know, that's really, really critical to a good painting. So now I'm coming over here. There's this big, so here's another thing that I do. If I need to figure out where that is on my page, I'll kind of measure with my thumb. And it comes in like around about there for the height of that thing. And it's roughly like that far from the top, so I can measure down. And then, you know, if I was out on location, I'd be doing the same thing. You know, when you see these sort of cliche scenes of Vincent van Gogh and the artist doing this, all this stuff. Well, what they're really doing is they're measuring and they're comparing things. So between the two thumbs, I'll hold it up and I'll look at, let's say there's a boat tip to the tail, and I'll go, okay, there's the width of the boat, and I'm seeing it between my two fingers. And now I'll compare the width of that boat to the space to the right of it and the space to the left of it. I'll say, well, how far away is that boat from that boat? It's about maybe half the width of that boat. So, okay, so I'll come back to my page. I'll mark it off. So there's a really specific thing, that proportions. They're comparing proportions to other things in the painting, so you have relative proportions. Anyway, so that I figured out where the tip of that that wood is, and then it comes way down into the painting, way down. It's a pretty big design element, right? Oops, sorry. There we go. I just love how it comes down, and then all of a sudden just goes crazy here, right? Like it's just I don't know. That's exciting to me. So I'll just kind of imply that. And remember though, I've got that law of the jungle thing. This has to fall, the tip here, I'm going to measure there, I'm going to measure here at my bottom, and the tip of that has to be somewhere below that. It can't be over here. If you do that, I guarantee you will never make a very believable water painting. So somehow or another, I have to get from here to there when I come to that point in my painting, okay? All right, so let's see, what else do I need? I've got a couple of other stems here, and then they come down, and they break off down there. Another one here. There we go. I usually have music on in my studio. I can actually hear the sound of my pencil on my paper. I never hear that. But I wasn't sure if having music on while I was doing this would be like just another aspect of making the feedback and who knows what. So I didn't bother. But as I get better at these, maybe I can have a little soundtrack going as well. What do you think, Barry? Is that a future dream for us?
We'll keep working on it. We're always learning something new about Zoom.
All right. So a couple more balls over here, and then another one there, something like that, and that one there. So, I think I have pretty much what I need to feel confident to go into my drawing. They're really indications, especially on a loose painting like this. If it was a house portrait, or sometimes I do very detailed paintings like the one I showed you of the people in the parks, then I have to sit and really figure out where everything is and do a very detailed drawing and, and have that information down before I go. But in this case, it's not so important. And now that highlight of that sun, right, it sits right above the rear end of this boat. So I'm going to just kind of indicate to myself where that is. The cool thing about pencil is you can often erase it right through the watercolor. So when I'm done the painting, sometimes there's some pencil lines that I don't like. They kind of interrupt the information I'm trying to relay. So I'll come back with an eraser and I'll actually erase those back out. All right. So I think I'm about ready to wet up my page and start in here. All right. So I'm going to leave this painting. So once again, I'm going to wet this area and I'm going to only paint it down to here. Okay. And I'm going to wet it and then I'm going to try to bleed this up into it. And then I'm going to come work the bottom. All right. So here we go. I want a fairly big brush. There you get it, my Russian brush. And I'm going to dampen up. So I'm dipping down. You can't see it, but I've got a 5-gallon bucket that's down here on the floor of my studio. And I'm just going to start to wet this sky. I want it quite wet because I don't want it to dry too quickly, right? So I really want to have it nice and wet so I can have some time to paint into it, because I'm going to be mixing quite a few colors into my wet area. All right. Let's see, I think I'll still bring a little more water into that. Now, the thing you have to be careful with watercolor is if you get too much water on an upper edge like that, it can go around the back side. And then you think you're all done and you get what's called a bloom, and the color from the back comes around and stains the top of your painting. So it could be a little tricky. All right. There we go. Now I'm going to also wet up the bottom of the painting, but I'm going to leave a dry spot on that horizon. So often when I'm painting, I have to actually hold my painting up to see where my water is. I'm actually looking across it. I have a studio light up here and I'm catching the reflection of the light. So I'm not going into my sky, because if I do, my water will run right from my sky down into the bottom of my painting. So right there, I think I'm good. That's so nuanced, you guys can't see it, but I've just left a dry spot right across the painting there, so that my water my washes that I do up here aren't going to run down below. So anyway, this can just sit now and be wet and do its thing. Okay.
David, if I can interrupt for just a second,
Yes.
Someone is asking, what kind of paper are you using?
Okay, I'm using a Fabriano paper. It's called Fabriano Uno. I use Artistico and I use Uno, and it's 300 pound, which is the heaviest paper you can buy. It's great paper. It's not cheap. It's Italian, it's like $11 a sheet. If you buy it in bulk, you can get it cheaper, but you can really work the paper. You can put a lot of layers into it. It'll hold moisture for a long time. Now, I'm going to do a quick diversion. Hold on. I'm going to grab something. This is worth knowing since you asked a good question, okay? All right, I'm back. So normally if I was doing a demo, I would have all this stuff around me and I could point at it. But in this case, it's, it is what it is. Anyway, when I'm traveling on the road, if I'm gone for 6 weeks, I need a lot of paper, right? I used to bring a portfolio with me, but the airlines started to get really, really picky on baggage. They wanted to charge for everything. They used to let me take it and bring it in the plane on the overheads. And then all of a sudden they stopped letting me do that. So I had a problem. How do I get my paper with me? I can't buy that paper in Thailand or China. They might have it in one of the big cities, but not where I'm at. So I had to figure out how I could bring lots of paper with me. So here's, for you real plein air painters, this is really worth knowing. I buy one of the construction things from Home Depot. These are really solid. They're for pouring cement into. And then I roll my paper up and I put it inside here. But what I do is the outside paper is my 300-pound paper because it's so stiff, it doesn't want to roll that easily, right? And if you roll it really small, it'll actually get some scars in it. You'll damage the paper. So I use 300-pound paper and I roll in. It's like a log. And then when I get closer to the middle, I go down to 150-pound pressed paper, which is a lot thinner. It's not my favorite paper to work on, but I need a month and a half's worth of paper to work on. So that's my workaround. I used to only use 300-pound paper, but now I found that the 150 actually works pretty darn good. And I can take a ton of it with me easily. So there you go. That's the travel side of what I do. There's a few little tips that are worth knowing, but I'll tell you what, that sucker is really heavy. By the time I've got it filled up with paper, it's a lot of weight. So I try to slide through the check-in on the plane and sort of act like it's really light as I'm carrying it. And then when I come home from my trip, I now have typically like 80 paintings done from a trip. And I don't really want to put those in checked luggage because what if they got rolled over by a loader or something like that? So that's even more important that I can bring it carry-on. Anyway, I came here to paint, right? Here we go. So now I'm just going to wet this up one more time. And again, that's the beauty of this paper. It's deep paper. It can hold a lot of moisture. So I don't have to worry about it drying out so quickly. Okay, now I'm going to grab one of my bigger brushes out of here. I've got some cool Chinese brushes. I lived in China for a couple of years. And I lived in Guangzhou, China, and there was an art school there. And so I'd go over and meet artists and they'd take me to their art supply stores and I'd buy all sorts of cool stuff that was Chinese. So I love Chinese brushes. Okay, so I've got a couple brushes in hand. I grab that one too. And I'm going to mix up. My first color is going to be a blend of that warm. So can they see that pretty well, Barry? Is that pretty clear? Oh, there you go. Okay. So that's that warm yellow that I talked about earlier. I'm going to put that over everything. I need paper towel in hand. I cannot paint without paper towel because, in watercolor, as well with oil, sometimes you're pulling back as much as you're putting on, right? You'll put something down, then you'll pull back out of it. And so when I get that sun that I'm trying to get on this page, that's I'm going to get that sun by actually pulling back the paper, the color off the paper. Again, I want to make sure this sky is nice and wet so it doesn't dry up on me. I'm wetting up my outer edges. All right, here we go. So I'm grabbing a bit of that warmer yellow. And so what's really going on in this painting is I'm vignetting in from the outer edges. You don't necessarily know it when you look at the painting, but I flick a lot, by the way. It's my studio, I can mess it up. They're not always so thrilled with me when I'm at a demo at a library and I'm flicking on the floor, but it all works out somehow. Okay, so I want to get more pigment on that page though. So I'm going to start again. See how I'm deep up there and I'm deep up in this corner. And then that sky, that sun is all light in there, right? So I'm working up to it. Now I've always got my paper just in case something decides it wants to run down my page. I'm going to stop it before it gets too far away on me. Now I have my cadmium scarlet, and I'm going to bring that into this and just kind of and build that in there. Now I've got to, watercolor dries about 1/3 lighter than the color you put down. So, you'll be in the middle of painting and you'll put a wash in and you're like, oh, it's perfect. I love it. And then in 10 minutes, you're like, what happened to my wash? The damn thing dried way too light. So you usually just have to kind of like, I don't know, be bold and brave. And sometimes I paint with watercolor almost like I'm painting with oil. I really get dense with it. So now you can see I'm building a vignette up, right? And now it's starting to make the white in the center here really kind of glow because I'm cutting down all the areas around it. And, the more I do that, the more dramatic that center is going to be, right? Now, as I told you earlier, I don't really want any edges in the middle of that view. So I've got another brush with clear water on it. And I'll just kind of like, tickle those edges. If I put too much water on there, it's going to run down. I'm going to get a bleed right through here. So I'm just like tickling the edge there. I just want to vignette it. Now, remember, this is wanting to dry up on me over here, and I still have things I need to do over there. So I'm going to bring, there's like a French ultramarine kind of a color creeping in from the side up there. See that? Now you got to be really fast about it. You can't just keep going back into it. It's a kind of a one-time hit up there. And then it's bleeding in and coming across here, almost like a gray, but it's got a touch of pink in it. So there's all these little things you do as you're painting that are just very grab bag, and it's very spontaneous. It's like kind of stream of conscious in a way. I used to play, I'm a musician, and I used to play with a guy by the name of Predrag Petrovic, a terrific Serbian buddy of mine. And sorry, I'm trying to talk and think and tell stories at the same time here. Well, I've got paint drying too fast. Okay, I'm dropping a little pink up into that corner, right? So see how it's still wet enough that I'm able to get the edge to vignette in. There's no edge up there, right? Look at that. It's like I want it to glow, right? I want it to come in there. Now it looks like I have a little more yellow in my, see, so there's my original. There's a little yellow in here. I'll see if I can sneak some of that in there just for kicks. Anyway, I've made a lot of music with Pred. And one thing I noticed, I'm a rhythm guitarist, but I'm not a soloist. And I used to watch his fingers sometimes, and I realized that he no longer had to think about how to make the chord. He had to think about the music he was making. But the technique was out of the way because he was so good on his instrument, he didn't have to really think about how the sound is made. It's the creative decision about what sound to make. And so what I've realized after years and years of painting is when I look at a color, I don't really have to intellectualize the process much about how to make the color. It just kind of happens. And it's really what the confusing part is when I'm doing a demo and I have to actually explain what I'm about to do. Usually that just happens on its own. And, anyway, so now this bottom is beautiful, nice and wet here, right? I'm going to drop a little bit of the purple color in there just to kind of get something going up into the sky there. I think it's still wet enough. And here we go. I'm going to drop this mountain into there. It comes across that hole and around. Again, it doesn't have to be an exact copy of what I've got here, but it's the spirit of what I've got that I'm trying to capture here. So now you see how the soft top edge of that is wet enough that it's fusing up into the sky, kind of dreamy. That's what I want. And then it gets a little darker over here, more into indigo. So we'll let that happen. My brother's dog's named Indigo. Indigo is a great color. You can really get some nice darks with that. So one of the really important things to me is this, I'll go back to the painting, but that highlight that I mentioned earlier, that's one of the edges that I really want to keep, and that's right below that sun, right? So it's like right in there. So I just want to make sure I do not paint over that. Otherwise, these other areas, I can kind of fuse them and play around with them. Okay, so now I want to go down and start to work on the bottom of this painting. And I don't want to end up with an edge here, right? So I'm just going to where's my thing? There's my sun. There we go. I'm just going to take the edge off that bottom of that area. I'm going to leave that crisp part right there. And I'm going to come over here and do the same thing, okay? So now that's all soft, but you can see there's just a little area where I've left that edge. I might even come back and soften that later, but for now, that's where it's going to sit. Okay, so now I'm going to start working up from the bottom to meet that. I'm going to wet this up again because I really just do not want this thing to dry out on me too fast. So there we go. Where'd my big brush go? Did I put it down somewhere? There it is. I think this brush I've had for like 20 years, and it's just like my go-to brush. Love it. All right. So now I got to think in reverse, right? Whatever I put here is now here coming back down and vignetting into these deeper colors in the corner, right? So there's back to the original again. I'm bringing this yellow into this top of the scene, coming down into this pink, and then finishing up with this sort of blended bluish grayish, you know, how do you name a color like that? I don't know how to name it, but bluish grayish, pinkish, yellowish, you know. All right, so back to my original yellow. Now, typically in water, when you're reflecting, the colors are a little deeper, right? It's not the sky, it's the water. And so even if it really looks like that sky, chances are it's just a little deeper. So I'm going to remember that as I'm mixing up my colors. So I'm dropping that in there now, right? Over there. And then I'm going to come around and leave that little highlight that I was talking about right there. Okay. But I think I might want that to be a little deeper, especially over here. Remember, I vignetted at the top, so I better vignette at the bottom as well. And if that highlight seems a little bright, I can go in there with a smaller brush and just kind of soften the upper edge of that a little bit. There's all these little nuanced things you can do. And I can always come back over this at some point as well, once it dries up a bit. So now I want this to be nice and wet, and I'm going to start to bring that pink into it. Okay, so that's my cadmium scarlet. Almost looks like there's some alizarin crimson in there as well, but who knows? Okay, so boom, 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 boom. I don't say boom, boom, boom when I'm out there painting on location, but it just seems to make sense while I'm here on TV or whatever this is. All right, so that seems like it's going to be about right. I don't know. It's a bit of a crapshoot. As many, I've done probably done 5,000 paintings, and I still never know exactly how it's all going to pan out. If any of you are drinking wine, I posted on my Facebook note yesterday to get back in your armchair and enjoy. Have a nice drink. I might even pour myself a glass in a while. We'll see. So now I'm moving down into the French ultramarine. So here's the other thing that I do. I use these bulldog clips a lot when I'm painting, but I got to move them around because I don't want to have a little white spot on the corner, right? So now I'm moving that up into that wash. And I want to now just do a really nice vignette up there. Boom, 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 up there. And then remember, I want those little highlights coming down my page, right? So I'm going to just try to pull out a couple of spots from that wash. Again, it's directly below that sun. And here we go. Just a little something to kind of get the magic coming down through the page, you know. Most painters will tell you that painting is really just all about light. We're really just absolutely madly in love with light, and that's how I feel. So if I wanted to build that then you up again from the corner. I could add a little more French ultramarine over here, right? But I got to be careful. This is starting to dry up here. So I've got to be, if I'm going to bring a brush stroke in, I got to be just, you know, and I might do a little more over here. And there's a little anomaly there in the painting. There's like a little weird spot there. So I'm just going to kind of grab that. And then you always got to think about if you're going to like imply waves. So this has, I'm sort of implying them there. They have to be in sync with that horizon. How water moves across, how waves moves across water is really important. And you have to be aware of the whole of the painting. If all of a sudden you put a wave down this way, the whole painting is basically ruined because there's just no way water would be moving. It'd be like it'd be falling off the world, right? So you got to be really aware of what gravity does and how waves move. There's a logic to them. And if you don't get it right, yeah, your body of water will pour out the edge of your painting. Okay, so I'm pretty close, right? It's not exactly the same. This painting now has a little more yellow in here than this one does. This one has a little more pink in the middle. But I think that's going to dry up and give me a pretty good basis to work from. Okay, so now here's the problem. This might still be a little too wet to go into. So the trick with knowing how wet your page is, you put your pinky on the edge of the paper and you touch it, and if it's still cool, then you know your page is still too wet to paint into. If I go into this now, I don't know if that helps at all, but if I go into this right now, I have to be so careful because if it's too wet, it's going to run down the page and it's going to break up all my washes down here in a way that's not ideal, far from ideal. But I'm going to test it, okay? So the way I test it is I get a smaller brush and I'll drop a little pigment in there such that it can't travel too far, and we'll just see, okay? So I'm going to mix up one of these. I think this is probably made out of indigo, maybe with a little bit of green in it. I don't know. I'll just stumble around with it. But I'm going to just kind of, what was happening was there were some cool trees across there, but it was that morning haze, and you're looking into the lights. You can't really see things, but there's things implied. So I'm just going to try to play around with that and see where that goes. So I'm in my French ultramarine here, a little indigo in the corner. And I will grab a little bit of sap green and throw that into it. And then we'll just see what happens. No, it's a little too dark. I might be able to get away with it. Let's see. So the whole key here is knowing exactly how much water is on your brush. If there's too much water on that brush, you're in truck and fubble, as they say. All right. We were doing a family Zoom last night. I told you earlier that my parents live in Toronto and my brother's in New Jersey. And my father had a pretty hard, fast rule that he did not curse. And he really did not curse. But he had a few tricky ways of saying curse, and one of them was trucking bubble. So we were having a good laugh about cursing, and I met one of his uncles, and I'd met him many times. I loved this guy. His name was Uncle Bill. And what I hadn't realized that every time I'd been with him, there had been women around. And one time I was wandering through London with him, and my female friend left at the time, and I was alone with Bill, and all of a sudden every other word was a curse word. So back in the day in London, my father says, men would never curse around a woman. That was just not okay. But if they weren't there, it was free flow. So I think my father heard so much cursing as a kid. He's like, you know what? I just don't need any of that in my life. Anyway, I digressed a little bit there. So I'm just trying to get this wash on and get it to bleed. It's a little dry on me, but I'll tease the top edge. I just wet it up there. I can come back very quickly and bleed that up. You see how I soften that whole edge there? And I'm going to do the same at the bottom here. I'm going to bring that pink down a touch. So it's all these very little nuanced sort of things. And then, you know, the darker darks are here on the edge, but when they come into that little, whatever you call it, the halo of the sun coming through, I've got to pull back on a little bit because it would kind of shut, it would just, you wouldn't see the depth of the dark there. So I'm just putting a little more pink in there and, you know, playing around with vignetting it up there. So that's, I'm pretty happy with that. That works pretty good for me. Again, if you move your brush quickly and decisively across, you can kind of get away with stuff. And now you can see there's a hard edge there. So I've just dried my brush up. I always have paper towel, like I grab away and I'll just pull back the upper edge of that. So what I've done is I've taken the moisture out of my brush. And so now my brush, instead of being something that lays color down, it's pulling color up. It's pulling liquid up. So the great thing about good hairs like Sable is that they have this ability to suck moisture up into them. So you can actually remove things from your painting with your brush if it's dry enough, but you know, 2 seconds later, you wet it up and it wants to lay it down. This far right edge I see, I just probably want that to be a little bit softer. So I'm gonna run a pink across there. And then I'm gonna quickly, just very quickly do that. Now, this is actually still a little moist. So I took a liberty there. It could bleed into it and cause an edge, but I think I'm good there. So, you know, if you look at, you know what I'm doing here? On the corner of my page, I hope you can see that, I've got hairs from my brush that came out as I was doing my wash. Sometimes they can actually collect pigment behind them. They can cause a kind of a mark in your sky. So I'm just trying to lightly brush them away so I don't have that there. In a really nuanced sky like this, in a regular sky, it wouldn't matter so much, but a nuanced sky like this, it can be a problem. So I've done the same thing here. I don't want to be gone. All right, there we go. One more there. All right, so to me, that's a pretty good structure to put this painting over. Something kind of funky happened here, but that wasn't actually my fault. There's I've had some pages that will the sizing, some of these Fabriano papers, you can't keep them around that long. The sizing in them kind of goes. I don't know if it's something in the air, if it's like some sort of chemical in the air or what, but there's a kind of, there was a weird spot in this page. Maybe it was an older sheet and I didn't realize it. But anyway, if I need to, I can kind of work that out of the painting as it goes. I'll just hold it up closely so you guys can see that. You know, demos can be good for showing how things can be done, but they can also be good for showing how you like solve problems and things that you didn't expect to have happen. All right, so now these boats, there's places where they're soft and there are places where they're hard. Within the body of this little cabin here, I've got some really nice juicy washes going on in there, right? I've got a base color of like a pinkish gray, and then I'm sliding into it a green. I'll hold this up for you so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's see, is that close enough to really see? I hope it is. I can't hear you guys saying yes or no. If I'm in a live demo, yeah. People are like, yes, no, whatever. Anyway, I'm trying to get that nuanced wash right in there. And so that means a little wet on wet, but it's still within a dried area, okay? Let's see how dry this is. I think it's dry enough to work into now. These bulldog clips, I'm gonna take them off, dry them off a little bit, and I'm gonna bring it back down the page to my original edge there. My original edge down here. So now it's holding my paper nice and tight. You know what's so interesting? This is a print. I have this guy in Evanston who does my print work for me, and he's so good. It's a damaged print, so that's why I'm using it, because I knew I'd flick paint on it, and it's, you know, it was damaged over the years. So but with watercolor, the prints now are getting so good because the paper actually has a deckled tooth to it. Oil painters are kind of in a hard spot. They can't really get copies of their oil paintings to look like the original because you don't have that thick paint, you don't have the texture. But with watercolor, it's hauntingly good how good it gets. So anyway, here we go. I'm gonna do a wash in here. Now there's one other thing that's really important. There's a highlight on the edge of this boat, okay? And for the people who don't work in watercolor regularly, the devil's edge with watercolor is that highlight is there by leaving the white of the paper. I didn't come back and put a white line there with paint because opaque doesn't really look very good in a watercolor. There's sometimes you can get away with it, but for me, it's the key thing is keeping the freshness of the paper. So when I put this wash in, I'm going to do the same thing I talked about up here. I've got to leave that edge on the boat because what's cool is that edge is really reflecting this light, right? It's popping, and so that's necessary in this scene. Okay, so I'm going to do a little workaround here. Again, I want to make sure that's dry. In a perfect world, I'd leave that for another 10 minutes, but we're in the middle of a demo. So I'm going to see if I can push it a little bit and make it work, all right? So I'll start with that grayish, bluish, pinkish haze. So I just grabbed some alizarin crimson and I'm mixing it into my French ultramarine, which gets me to a purple. But if I want to gray that out a little bit, I'll probably just touch maybe a little phthalo into it. Let's see if phthalo does the trick. That's working pretty good, or a little bit of sap green. You know, I don't know how many of you know about color theory, but you know, the way to gray something out is you have to drop its opposite into it, right? So if you have a red, you're going to use your yellow and blue and some combination therein against it to get the gray that you want. So I just killed that a little bit with the green, and that's pretty close, right? Now it goes from light to dark. I'm going to start up on the bow. So often I reached over here and I touched my page. I usually have a tester sheet near me so I can see what the color really is. Okay, so let's see if I can come down this bow and come right along there. I'm going to bump right into that little structure where the fisherman sits if he's stuck at sea and he's either the sun's too hot or he's at night and he's got to have a place to sleep. And then I'm going to come up into the top of that and just run along. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, and then comes down. And like I said, I'm going to leave that edge. I'm going to come right down to the back of the bow, back of the boat, not the bow. And then that moves into a kind of a more of a purpley, reddish color back here. So there's all these little things that matter, you know. This started off in a more of a soft, almost very light gray here, and then it vignetted along and came into that, and then it finishes up a little more of a purple. I'll drop a little blue into that. So then I was talking about this area here. I'm going to grab a little sap green and a little blue, and I'll drop that into there and hope it bleeds out. Yeah, like that, right? And you can always, you know, you can work into your washes. It's fun to drop things into it and kind of adjust them. I'm dropping a little blue in there, right? So that feels pretty good. Now I see that there's the darkness in here comes up and through. So I'm going to pull that wash back up this way now. All right. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now this gray wash that I had up here, I can actually bring it right down and all the way into the bottom of this boat because the gray is lighter than this red. And in watercolor, you generally work from light to dark. Not always, but often. So I'm going to actually sweep that down around now. Where was that? Kind of there. So my father and I always have a running joke about our palettes. My father likes to have a nice clean palette, and I generally have a really messy palette. And somehow we both get the job done, but with very different approaches. So I actually cleaned my palette for you guys today, but normally it would be like gunked up and I'd start in with it kind of dirty. All right, so now I'm going to come along the bottom here. Now remember how I was saying I have to leave this highlight on that edge? That's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to come along there and I'm going to leave that right there, and it comes all the way down the boat, all the way down, right to the end, and then this comes up, and that's the back of that boat there. Okay, and now I want to keep this all wet because now I'm back into a wet on wet scenario. So time becomes a factor again. You know, when it's detailed areas, you can take your time and work it, but here I've got some timing issues. All right, so there's that. I'm going to let that area dry a little bit. I'm going to bring some of that red into it now. So that red has been cut back a lot. Here's the red I'm trying to mix right there. It's dense. It's pretty thick, so I want to get quite a bit of paint on my brush and make it thick. There's some implied numbers here. There probably were some real numbers there. A lot of these boats are registered, but I want to leave some little detail there. So that's what I'm trying to mix to right now, okay? So let's see. I'll grab a little bit of my cadmium scarlet, and I might mix maybe some indigo into it. Oh, that's getting me there. That's getting me there. There's a lot of ways to get at it. You know, you can come at it from different directions. There's no one way. So I'm going to see how that comes down there. Not bad. I can live with that. All right. Right down. And again, I'm preserving that nice crisp line all the way down and up and around that bend. All right. And then I'm going to have to be quick with this line because it's a one-shot deal. I'm going to come here and right down and meet that line, okay? And then it'll vignette up into that upper section. All right. And then now I can come down here. So I got to be careful. If my finger's dirty and I put it on this area, if there's watercolor on there that's dried up, it could, because this is damp, it could make a mess on there. So one trick is to put my finger on the horizon and do it that way. But I think it's dry enough for me to just rest my knuckle on there because I need a steady hand to do this part. I want that edge to be really crisp coming down there, the bow of that boat. I want that to be crisp. And now I'm going to kind of imply those little squiggly things there. And then I'm going to come right along here. And then what happens is there's a beautiful French, oh, it's not a French ultramarine, it's a grayed out French ultramarine that blends up into that. So I'm going to just grab that and put right along here. Is that too dark? Maybe. Let's see. There we go. All right, that's kind of cool. I love the nuance you can get with watercolor. It's an amazing medium. I do work in oils. I showed you that one before, and I just did a big commission for somebody in oil. But I seem to have a oneness with watercolor. And my father, as I mentioned to you before, he's the editorial illustrator. Well, he worked in line and wash, and so there's a lot of watercolor in that. So I kind of, I remember sitting on his lap as a kid, and he was doing a job for some big magazine, and he was about to paint the sky, and he's I don't know if I'd gotten home from kindergarten or something. He sat me on his lap and he let me hold the brush and put color in the sky. And so I think I've kind of understood the medium for a long time. All right. So now I'm taking that reflection, I'm taking the haze of that boat, and I'm going to come down into the water. And there's a couple of little highlights here that I'm going to try to leave in there because that's where I'm starting to have my reflections come into the game, right? So, and that's a pretty deep, rich blue coming off the bow of that boat. So I'm going to come in here and around there. And the trick is you got to do this with confidence and just like own these reflections. If you don't, if you come in and go too slow, they'll kind of look dead, you know, they'll lose their life. And now I'm going to come back along the bow of that boat with that blue and leave a bit of that other haze there. And just that actually gets killed off. I'm going to pull a green in just to cut it back a bit as it gets to the back of the boat. And do that. And take that right to the back. Okay. And then I'll just kind of like do a couple of reflections. And then I got to vignette it again. And so I'm taking paint off my brush and I'm going to run back into that. It's all still wet, right? So now it's still dropping down and vignetting to the back. And now I've got to get my brush up on its tip because I want a nice sharp edge to leave a few of those little highlights in the water. But this all has to, it's wanting to dry fast on me. So I got to keep this edge wet and this edge wet. So I just keep coming back along and wetting it up. And then I can come back in here and let's see, maybe leave another little reflection like right there. So it would probably be this reflecting into the water, not necessarily, but there we go. And on there. Geez, I can actually hear the sound of my brush on the page. I never hear that either. The sound of silence. All right, and now I'm going to mix some indigo in because this reflection starts to take on more contrast back here, right? Down here, it gets darker. So I'm going to vignette this little soft nuanced green wash down into some darker areas, and then that really starts to punch the reflection, right? So now I'm dropping that in there, and it's still wet enough that it's bleeding up into that wash. Hello, darkness, my old friend. All right. Right now, what I said to you earlier, things have to be below things, right? So the tip of this boat, I'll do this on location. It's exactly what I'll do. I'll do that, and I'll come down here, and I'll just put a little mark with my brush. It's got to get there. It's just not going to look right, right? So I can just, that's my point, and then I can kind of almost do anything I want between there. You know, this is whatever, but it's got to travel that distance over there to be reflected directly below, or it's not going to look right. And now here I can just kind of have some fun, but I have to be careful. These reflections are, remember, if a wave had come off the bottom of that boat, it'd be coming this way, right? Most likely. So I got to make sure my little reflections are they're defining the little waves, the little rivulets. So I've got to make sure, almost like, you know, those printers that go zzz, zzz, zzz. I kind of do that with my brush and just sort of go back and forth. And again, I've got the same issue. The back edge of this boat, I run my brush down the edge. I just make sure I'm in line with it because it's not going to read right if I don't. All right. And then I can just sort of do that. And then I can take more paint off my brush. It's almost dry now, and get some really thin little lines that are the reflection's getting further away from the boat now. And, you know, just have some fun and see where it goes. All right, there's that. Back here, I can do the same thing and work this edge down, right?
Just a reminder to our audience members, please feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. And David, I'm wondering, how do you know how far to come down with the reflections in the water?
Well, when you're on location, you can see what they do, but you know, it's all about believability. And again, it's about composition. Sometimes I want the interest of this boat to come further down the page. So, you know, I can work it. I can take it a little further down if I feel like it needs it. Now I've got the flag up here that I'm going to bring in, and I'm going to bring that down the page as well. So here's a nice thing that happened in this painting that's actually not in the original. See how these little blue lines that I put in there ended up reading like really soft waves? So that's happenstance, right? There's, when you're working wet on wet, there's things that just happen, but I'm actually happy with those and the way they worked out. Anyway, did I answer your question well enough, Barry?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
All right. And then I can, you know, I can come back in and darken areas and just sort of play around. So what's kind of weird is when we were doing our dress rehearsal, I was able to zoom my camera in and out by touching the screen. But when I went on to zoom, it wouldn't let me do that. So if anybody out there knows how to get my camera, I'd actually like it to be zoomed in a little bit more. But now that I'm in my Zoom meeting, I'm not actually able to get my camera to zoom. So if anybody out there happens to know that, you could let Barry know and she can let me know it's a Samsung. Okay, so that boat's sitting pretty good to me. How are we doing on time? We're 8 o'clock, right, Barry?
Yes, so we've got another half hour.
All right, so there's one more video I'd like you guys to see. It's only a minute, and then I'll come right back into the painting. I was in Munnar, India, which is a tea plantation town in the south part of India. And I was with my family, and we're staying at this really cool little old British colony kind of cabin in the middle of nowhere in Munnar. And at night, they would offer a deal where for like $1 or $1.50, you could have dinner at their little Airbnb kind of place. I think it was like $6 a night to stay there, right? Really cheap. And there was this really cool American guy, Neil Sharma, and he's a kind of a rap hip hop guy. And he was he had his video equipment with him as well. And he said, David, do you mind if I shoot you? And I said, sure. He said, what I do is I strap a camera to your chest, and I'm going to make a 1-minute video. When it's edited, it's going to be 1 minute. It's called The Art of Life. And he was traveling around the world and just grabbing people that he found interesting for whatever his definition of interesting was. I guess I fell into that. So the next video Barry's going to play for you is what he did of me just going out, and I was painting. There was some little buildings below where we were staying, and a lot of the people that worked in the plantation lived in these buildings. And it's really got a nice groove to it. So Barry, if you want to hit that, that'd be great.
Okay, here we are.
And is there audio track? All right. So if I'm singing at times, what color is it? Red. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. 10, 12. How beautiful. If you stay there, I'll draw you in. Come on, who can get that ball off him? Oh, well done, go. Okay. The artist who's making their living by their art always ends up confronting themselves. happening. Low, low. Oh my God, it's beautiful. All right. Ciao. Look out for tuk-tuks.
Awesome. Thank you, Barry. Are we back live?
Yes.
All right. So if you look him up, The Art of Life, you'll see he must have done 30 of them, 40 of them, and they're really, really interesting. They're not usually foreigners there. They're usually locals wherever he may be. But anyway, pretty cool what you can say in 1 minute, huh? All right. So the good thing is now everything in my painting is pretty much dried to where I want it to be. I'm just going to start working in some of these different areas. You know, if I don't get a chance to finish this painting before the whole event is through, I'll try to finish it in the next day or two and post it for you guys. You can see how it looks. But what I see these demos as mostly is a means to learn about painting, right? So it's not so much about the finished results. It's about learning techniques and things you can use. Hopefully inspiring the ones of you who don't paint much to paint. You know, this whole, again, you know, lemons to lemonade, the whole COVID situation has probably forced us to have to be a little more introspective and a little more self-entertaining. You know, you can just get a little pad of paper and a little brush and a little watercolor set and just sit and look out your back door. Even if it's wintertime, you can look out through your back window and paint the snow or paint whatever's going on, the leaves falling. Jump in there, you know, and see what happens. You just never know how this all plays out. All right, so I'm looking at my painting now, and I'm just to be sort of, I wanted to be picky. This dried a little lighter than what this dried, right? So if I want to deepen that, I can do it easily. I'm just gonna mix up a slightly darker wash and put it right in there. See that? And now remember, again, I'm leaving these little highlights. And then at the bottom of the wash, I'll get my brush and I'll just bleed it in like that, right? So I've deepened it. And then if I had to put another layer to deepen it, I could put another layer. Watercolor, people are afraid of watercolor, but it's amazing. I get away with murder on my watercolors. Really, it's amazing what you can do and problems you can solve. Okay, so these little flags here. They're very fine little lines. So I have this brush that I'm using, and actually this is a synthetic brush. I used to only believe in natural fibers, but I must say the synthetics are getting so good and they're so much cheaper. So I'm gonna try to get my arm balanced. I usually rest it on my other arm, and I just want to get a nice straight line coming right down there. So again, thinking back on Chinese painting, when the Chinese calligraphers do their sweeps, they're working on mulberry paper, and it is absolutely unforgiving. You make a mark, there's no erasing, there's no washing it out. So they talk about the zen of, you know, movement and gesture and just being kind of at one with things. That's kind of what happens in these paintings. There's some things where you just have to say, okay, I'm going to make the mark, and the mark is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it because I can't go back in with white. I can't fix this. It just is. So, you know, once you get that in your head, it's sort of a fatalistic side. So you just go, okay, well, here we go. So I'm dropping that line in there. And again, you know, if there's too much water on that, it'll look washed out. If it's too rich, it'll pop too much. And I want to make sure this boat fades back. I don't want it to pop out. It pops a little more on the back here with that. So if that felt a little too strong, I'll take a little pigment off that brush. And then there's another little squiggly next to it that's like a, you know, just come right down there. So getting really thin lines can be very important. And that just comes with years and years of practice. this little, these boat sticks here, they come into the boat, right? That's cool. So it creates a little space in there, right? So I've got to make sure I'm going to start the line from the right and bring it down and make sure it stops. It's going to define the edge of that bow. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. That's so funny. You know, I don't even remember having sung that day. And there it appears in the video. So he's like, in a way, he's doing a sketch of me, right? And he's grabbing things that he finds interesting. You know, I was there probably for 2.5 hours doing that painting, and he condensed it down to a minute. But he's got to, this is the art of making film, right? He's got to decide what was worth keeping and what's worth leaving out. I probably, maybe I sang the whole song. He didn't need that. He just needed that little thing in there. All right, so there's one line. And there's another line. Okay. The bow of the boat has this nice punchy tip that comes up there, right? So I'm gonna knock that in there now, and that's like a ready brown. So I'm going back. If you can see my palette, I go back into my colors, right? If an acrylic had dried like that, there's nothing you could do. It's dry. You can't wet it up and reignite it. Watercolor, that could sit there for 3 weeks, and I could come back to it and find that color, add a little water, and grab it, right? So back to my boat. I'll just start at the tip there and just take a nice hard edge right down to there. And then I'm leaving room for that little bandana thing that's on the tip of the boat, right? And comes around. And that's going to be beautiful color right there dropping down in. And then the bottom of that, for some reason, I've got a brown right there as well. Okay. Comes down. And then that reflects right here, which is so cool. Look at those little lines. They're just like, And it comes right down into the bow of that. Sorry, the shape of that. All right. Yeah, I like it. All right. I'll throw a bit of that bright yellow in there on that little bandana. This is my outside yellow. So the other thing about watercolor, for those of you who aren't watercolor painters, is that everything that's down is going to come through, right? So I'm never going to be able to get a pure yellow on this painting anymore because I've already got other tones on there. And when I put this yellow down, those are coming through it. So it won't be super bright. If I really needed to make it bright, I'll show you a little trick that I could do just because it is a demo. I can take an oil painting brush. So there's another thing. I always have an oil painting brush with me on my trips. And I could I could wash away on the tip of that little fabric there and pull back the pigment and get back to the white of the paper. If it really mattered, I could scrub there and get back to the white and make that pop. Anyway, let me just put a little bit of that yellow in there. There it is. Boom, right there. And then there's a little bit up here. All right. And then that little flag, just there. And then again, I'm going to make sure I get it right, but somewhere down here, that yellow is probably going to appear in the reflection, right? Boom, boom. So I can just have fun with it. So back to your question, Barry, I could actually get away with it probably all the way down here because water's funky. There could just be a little wave that's just high enough for it to catch a touch of that thing. And again, just have fun with it. Oops, I dropped my brush. All right. So let me put one of those buoys in the water. That'll be kind of fun. I didn't draw it in earlier, but let's see, there's a buoy right about here. And there's a highlight on that buoy. So I'm going to leave the light at the top of that. And then I'm just going to drop a couple of reflections in there. And I love the baby blue of that buoy. It's beautiful. All right. There we go. So even a little buoy like that, there's things going on. There's a darker side right down in here. And then on the back side, it lightens up a bit. If you guys have ever painted round objects in art school or your art classes, you got to kind of remember what makes things look round. I'll never forget when I lived in China, in Guangzhou, the town where I was living. There was a place there where artists, so I'm putting a highlight here, right? I'm leaving the color behind. There was a place there where artists would do reproduction paintings of master paintings. And there's a demand around the world for knockoffs of paintings. Now, in this case, they're not trying to, it's not a knockoff like they're trying to fool you that it's the original masterpiece. It's just that people would rather have an original on their wall that's a knockoff than a print. Anyway, these guys would sit there all day long making these paintings, but if they had any downtime, they all would have an egg with them, and they have the egg sitting on their table, and they would draw an egg. And it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do because that egg has certain reflections that tell you it's round, and then there's bounce backs below, and there's the highlight above. So I dare you guys to sit an egg in front of you and do a really good drawing of an egg. That was their training when they were bored and they had nothing to do. They would hone their skills by drawing an egg. So anyway, there's my little buoy down there. I'm putting a little more color into the bottom left corner of that. And I want to feel like, so I left the color of the page as the highlight there, right? And that's working pretty good. And then I'll just bring the reflection down like that. There, something like that. And that's just a nice element. So now another thing that's really important is painting is about looking. I mean, it's really about really looking. And the reason that plein air painters generally love to go out and paint from life is that when you've translated something to a photograph, you're looking at an interpretation of reality. You don't actually have light going on like it does in the real world, So in the real world, if I'm looking at this post that comes down here, it's not the same color from top to bottom. It's affected by what's behind it, right? And when you're looking at it in real time, you get all these interesting things that happen. And then over here where this light is bright, the stick that's below that can't be this dark. It just can't be because it's being bleached out by the sun. So my stick here is darker. This one gets lighter. This one gets lighter. This one's get even lighter here, right? So there's all these nuances that are really the joy of looking that happen when you're working on location that are kind of hard to get out of a photograph. Clever artists do it, and there's no one right way to make art. But boy, when you're there, there's an energy that you get from reality that's just hard to beat. Anyway, so I'm gonna drop that line in there. It's kind of I don't know if it's a taupe, it's a greeny taupe, maybe, if I had to name it. So I'm just mixing up a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I grabbed a bit of that yellow, and there was something next to it that was just there, and it seems like the right combination. Back to my buddy Pred, the guitarist, there you go, right? I just look at it and I know it's right. I didn't have to think about it. I just kind of know how to get there. So here we go. I'm going to test that color.
David, if we can just interrupt with a question real quick. Do you always paint vertically, or does it vary just for the demo or when you are painting plein air? That's a good question. And yes, I always paint vertically. Rarely will I put a painting flat. Sometimes if I have a really wet sky, really wet, and I want it to kind of meander in multiple directions, I might do it. But I like gravity. Gravity's my friend. I kind of know what's going to happen with my paint. There's a certain angle you can get away with. If it goes just beyond that angle, your washes will run down the page. So there's just there's just the right angle. But I just am comfortable this way. But there are a lot of the Chinese artists I'm mentioning, they work flat, and a lot of watercolor painters I know like to work flat. Not my thing. It just seems to work this way for me. Okay, so now I'm going to put this stick in. And again, it's got to be kind of a pretty decisive move.
straight down, just past the boat. And it keeps going down, right down. And then it has a slight angle change, but there's a slight color change too. So I've just grabbed a little color and then it comes back this way. And I'm going to kind of see if I can just let it be one stroke all the way down like that. And then, you know, and again, I'm going to get my long brush out and I'm going to measure. Again, I'm going to come here and I've got to come down and make sure that yeah, I'm pretty darn close. So I can just take it a little further if I want, you know. And again, Barry, just for you, Barry, there you go. I put one way down the page. Oh, look at that, even further. All right. So, all right. So, you know, you can see how this is kind of starting to take shape, right? Like I feel like I'm in the pocket for this painting. I feel like I haven't made any major blunders. Rubbing a few more hairs off. How are we doing on time, Barry? We got 9 minutes.
Yes, right about there. And again, if you would be so kind as to finish the painting at your leisure over the next few days, we'd be happy to put a still image of the finished painting at the end of the recording once we load it on our YouTube page for everyone to see the finished work.
Yeah, cool. No problem. All right, so now I'm going to do this left post. I've mixed up a slightly darker wash. Geez, I forgot to get a glass of wine. What was I thinking? Shoot. All right, I'll have one afterwards. I'll say cheers to you all. All right, I'm going to come down the page there. Now, I have to move my hand on this one, but if I start in above it and come down through it again, I can keep that continuous motion going. You know, again, if you don't get this right, it can be really funky. I'm coming all the way down to there, right? And I do have a pencil line behind it that I'm kind of using as my guide, but it doesn't really matter. I don't have to be right on it. And then it comes here, and then it just starts to kind of do its reflective thing, right? And yeah, bam, bam. And I like this one because it comes right down the bottom of the page. But again, I got to be careful I don't come over too far. Okay, I see where I'm at. There. All right. Another ball here. So, you know, when I'm doing this on location, some of these things might be happening really fast. I mean, think about it. This painting, when I started this painting in real time, that sun probably went from here to there in about 10 minutes or 20 minutes, right? So I had to be cranking along to get this painting, you know, in a place where I could continue it just from memory. You know, with sunrises and sunsets, you're left with guessing at a lot of things, you know, because they happen so fast. Yeah.
Do you ever photograph the scene so you can capture
Absolutely.
that particular image?
I do sometimes, you know, sometimes the detailed scenes, and let's say I started the light and I didn't know there was a storm coming, and all of a sudden, or like a big bay of clouds comes in and really changes my light. And I know it's a scene I can't come back to the next day. Maybe the next day I'm leaving to go to another part of my journey. Then I'll take some photos. Absolutely. You know, the camera, I don't have this hard, fast rule that there's like a sacred thing about plein air painting. I only plein air paint because I think I get the best results that way. And here's one other thing that I really want to make really, really clear about myself as an artist. When I make this painting in Thailand and there's people there and I'm in the world there, really the most powerful thing for my paintings actually isn't the painting itself. It's that the fact that the painting was made in these places, and it becomes a symbol of the fact that I was in a remote part of a part of the world that we might otherwise think of as dangerous, right? And it isn't. You know, I've been to remote parts of India that all on my own. I take scooter rides out in the countryside. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And maybe we'd stereotype and think, oh, that must be like, you know, you're so vulnerable. I was in the Mekong, right? The Mekong, we were at war with the Vietnamese 40 years ago. And I made a whole series of paintings there, and I felt absolutely loved there. There was whatever the hatred was and the issues were that were way back when, they were gone, and that wasn't put on me. And when you're doing something that's so visible, people know why you're there, right? So I look at my easel, I kind of think of it like a peace sign. You know, when I set up an easel in a remote area, people are unthreatened. When you have a camera there and you're taking pictures and you leave with the pictures, they never see what they were. They don't have a connection to you. They don't understand why you're doing it. The painting doesn't work that way. So when you see my art, I hope that when you look at a painting, you think, oh, he actually made it there. So he had to actually find a way to be respectful of their culture, um, engaging and polite in some ways, but also um, confident enough to step into space that others might be like, wait a second, I don't know if you should be there. You know, there's all these delicate lines, and I don't know. I've just found myself to be welcomed everywhere I go. And I'm not putting that on me getting credit for that. I just think that the world is really filled, for the most part, with kind people living pretty much lives just like we do. And that's the message in my art, is really, I just want that to be the takeaway, is that I make my paintings the way I do because I want them to be symbols of the fact that I went all over the world and I really felt at home and connected. And so that's what's really been disturbing to me about the COVID, is that, you know, I could hop on a plane and just go to Ecuador, just go to wherever, Timbuktu, and I've never had to think about it in my life. And now there's this thing which has nothing to do with whether I'd be safe there through my interactions with people. I have this virus that's like saying, not so fast, dude. So really looking forward to the day again when that comes around, and I'm quite confident that's going to happen. Anyway, I was meant to be painting, so I'll continue here. I know we're getting short on time. We got 3 minutes. That boat in here, okay? I'm going to mix up a dark color on the back, the rear of the stern of that boat. Is that the back, the stern? And bring it in there. Bring it across, and I'll let that post sit there against it, and then I'll come right across and do that. If anybody has any more questions, just throw them my way. And you know, if there's anything that comes up, my website is daviddallison.com, and I'm on Facebook, and also, you know, just to be a little bit commercial here, I have a lot of prints of work that I do, and you know, you're welcome to call me, and I can send you images, and you can see things on my website, and get somebody that dream Christmas present they've been wanting, a print of a David Dallison. Just throwing it out there. COVID's a challenging time, so gotta be a little forward. All right. So
we'll be sending out the link to your website to everyone who's registered. And if you're watching this as a recording, feel free to go ahead and contact the library, and we'd be happy to send that link to you.
thank you, Barry. All right, so I'm just kind of fiddling around now. I've got the top part of that boat, and I'll just, you know, this, when I'm on location, I'll be painting probably closer to this sort of speed, because I'm racing the sun, right? And I'm just like, okay, I got to get that in there and bring this up and decision, and then come back in and maybe throw a little wet wash across here, and then drop something into it. You know, so I paint pretty darn fast when I'm on location, because of necessity, like I say. You know, the sun's changing and things are moving. And okay, so now there's a greenish shadow below that boat that I'm going to grab with that sap green. And I'm going to just let this all drizzle down into that water and leave a little highlight along the bottom of that boat just for kicks. Boom, boom, boom. There we go.
David, I did go ahead and put the link to your website in the chat for those who are able to see that now. Again, we'll be sending that out to all the registrants and anyone who's watching the recording later who would like that. There is another question. Do you have any other demonstrations online? People are really enjoying this and hearing from you, and they're just wondering if there's anything else similar to that.
No, because we've never recorded them before. When I've done my demos, I've done many of them. It's funny that I'm glad you asked that, because this is so cool that you're actually recording this. When we talked now, I didn't realize it'd be recorded.
David, your audio is
Great.
cutting.
So moving to Vietnam and the little one from India. So, but I got to say, I've really doing this. It's been fun, and I can see some potential here. So, if you're inclined to want to see.
Your audio is cutting in and out a little bit. Yeah. Maybe you can check the controls on something. You do have the one microphone connected, so yeah, I can't hear you right now. If you can hear me.
Now I hear you again. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, something happened. I'm not sure what, but I see my camera's off. Oh, there we go. Are we good?
Yes, now it's good.
All right. I forget what I was saying. It must have been really important.
I think it was about the potential of other demonstrations.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So if you send me your email or your whatever way you want to be connected, or through Facebook, when I do a demo, I'll be sure to let you know, and we can go forward that way. Because yeah, it's kind of fun. I just figured I'd have to go places and do my demo there, but it's kind of nice to be here. And I'd like to go into more depth on some subjects, and maybe really get in. I'd love to it'd be fun to do a demo where I really do a very detailed painting, and maybe it would have to go over a few sessions, and do it that way. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of potential here.
Yes, and someone else was asking, just a confirmation. Yes, this entire program has been recorded, and we will be putting it on the library's YouTube page within about a week. And so as you registered for this program, we will be sending you the link to that playlist, and then specifically to this recording as it becomes available. So you'll be able to watch it again perhaps in its entirety if you didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, or to recommend it to a friend or loved one.
Yeah, great, Barry.
And we also thought that if you'd be so kind as to keep working and finish the painting, let it progress a little bit more than we're able to tonight, we'd be happy to include a long shot still of that finished painting to tack on
Sure.
at the end of the recording as well.
Yep, no problem. I'll do it. Well, anyway, thank you all for signing on. I don't know who's out there, right? Like there's no indication on my screen of who's there. So I presume there's some friends, and there's some people I don't know that could be friends now. And I could be talking to a remote part of China right now for all I know. So that's really pretty inspiring. That's a pretty unique feeling. But anyway, thank you all for dialing in and hanging in there and watching paint dry and listening to me go on. I hope you got something out of it. I definitely did.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite a large group, and many people are sending in their thank yous and their compliments on your work and how helpful this has been to them. So thank you so much, David. We really appreciate it. Again, thank you.
Really have, sorry, Barry, if any of you really do have technical questions, you can always send me an email or a note to my website, and I'm happy to answer those questions.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so we'll be sending out the link to that website if you didn't catch it. We'll be sending that out to all the registrants. And also, if you would, here, let me switch the spotlight so that people can see that.
Is it zoomed in too far? There we go.
Maybe a little too far. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Great. And so the cameras had a chance to focus in on that. Great.
Yeah, so there you go. That's me right there. Next time I'll get my guitar out and sing you a song or two.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you to the DuPage Art League for arranging this and putting all this together. We certainly appreciate them and all the work that's gone into this. Again, this program has been recorded, and we will be putting it on our YouTube playlist in just about a week, and that way people will be able to watch it again in its entirety or recommend it to someone. But thank you so much for your time. Again, there's lots of gratitude coming up through the chat and the Q&A here. David, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
You are welcome.
So good night, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, and we hope to see you again soon. Good night.
Bye-bye.